Did you know that in some Native American tribes, a woman could not marry until she was publicly examined by the elders? Or that among certain tribes, a bride had to undergo a blood ritual to prove she was ready for marriage? These aren't myths. They were real traditions, deeply rooted in belief systems where spirits, ancestors, and nature dictated every detail of human life. In this video, we dive into a forgotten world of sacred weddings, ritual pain, symbolic death, and spiritual obligations. Some customs were mystical, others were brutal, and some will haunt you. If this topic grabs your attention, leave a comment, hit like, and don't forget to subscribe, because this is not a legend. This is real life. In many Native American cultures, marriage was not just a contract between two people. It was a pact between spirits, the ancestors, and the natural world. Among the Apache, no couple could marry without the explicit blessing of a shaman. And that blessing didn't always come for free. In some cases, a sacrifice had to be made. Usually it was the blood of an animal, but in rare and sacred circumstances, it had to be human. The victim was often a slave, an outsider, or someone deemed socially useless. The body was killed in ritual fashion, and their blood was poured around the fire pit, where the new couple would build their first home. The belief was that only through sacrifice could the spirits be satisfied and the marriage protected. In certain Mesoamerican tribes like the Aztecs and Toltecs, couples had to go through what was called the trial by fire. The bride and groom would sit on opposite sides of a massive fire and stare into each other's eyes in complete silence, until one of them fainted. The one who gave in first would spend the first year of marriage serving the other. If the woman lost, she had to sleep on the floor, eat alone, and speak only when spoken to. If the man lost, he would have to clean the sacred fire pit every day and wasn't allowed to touch his wife for 40 days. While the ritual was said to purify the bond, from a distance it looked more like punishment. In parts of the Amazon, things were even more intense. There, a newlywed couple had to pass the shared pain ritual. This involved being burned with red-hot sticks on specific parts of the body, hands, chest, and back, while chanting sacred phrases. The scars, called fire marks, were lifelong reminders that marriage wasn't just about love. It was about survival, endurance, and spiritual unity through suffering. A body unscarred by pain was seen as incomplete. Among the Sioux and Cheyenne, another ritual known as blood cleansing was performed before the wedding night. The bride would be taken to a purification tent by the elder women of the tribe. There, they would use bones, herbs, and smoke in a painful, invasive ritual meant to open the paths of life. Women who refused were seen as cursed, and in extreme cases were expelled from the tribe entirely. Even though marriage was held as sacred, that didn't mean women were treated as equals. In warrior-based tribes, a woman became property upon marriage. She couldn't speak freely, she couldn't leave, and her sole duty was to bear children and care for the household. In some tribes, trial marriages were permitted. A couple would live together for a month, and if the elders approved, the union would be formalized. But even then, if the woman was deemed disobedient, she could be given to another man as payment or punishment. These are just the surface layers of a much darker world. In the next part, we'll look at ghost marriages, spiritual punishments, and what happened to women who resisted the elders' control. You think you've heard the worst? The truth goes even deeper. In many Native American traditions, marriage extended far beyond the living. In tribes like the Navajo and Zuni, weddings were not only agreements between man and woman, but covenants with the spirits of the dead. It was believed that if the ancestors weren't honored, the union would be cursed. That's why skulls, bones, or symbolic masks of deceased family members were often present at the ceremony. The bride and groom would kneel before them, speaking vows of loyalty not just to each other but to the entire ancestral line. If either broke their vow within the first year, through infidelity, disobedience, or disrespect, misfortune was expected: disease, stillbirths, or even death. In some cases, the punishment was not symbolic. Women accused of dishonoring the marriage could be locked in isolation, denied food, and, in the most extreme instances, ritually killed by the elders. Perhaps one of the most haunting rituals was the ghost marriage. Among certain warrior tribes, if a young man died in battle before marrying, his fiancée would be forced to wed him in death. The ceremony took place at night. The girl would be brought to his grave, where she would pledge her life to him, swearing eternal fidelity. In some cases, She would spend the night beside his body, surrounded by relics, charms, and a burning torch. If she survived the night, without running or screaming, she would be declared a spiritual widow. That title came with chains. She could never marry again, never have children, never speak freely. She was expected to live in shadow, among spirits, as a silent guardian of her dead beloved. Some women, unable to bear the grief or isolation, ended their own lives. Others fled the tribe, hunted as traitors, and banished forever. In northern regions, among tribes like the Cree or Haida, there was a chilling ritual known as, quote, ancestral pain. During the wedding, the couple would be taken into a sacred tent where elders recited oral histories, tales of famine, war, and personal sacrifice. As they listened, the bride and groom were struck with birch branches across the back and shoulders. The pain, it was said, would awaken ancestral memory, forcing the couple to carry the weight of those who came before them. If they failed to cry, they were seen as spiritually disconnected, not ready for union, but nothing compared to the sacrifices demanded after the birth of a first child. In Central American cultures, especially among early Toltec and Maya communities, the health of the firstborn was seen as an omen. If the baby was weak or sickly, it meant the couple had failed to please the spirits during their union. To atone, some tribes sacrificed animals. Others went further. In rare cases, a kidnapped child from another tribe was offered in fire, blood, or drowning. These ceremonies were secret, hidden from younger members, but considered essential for the survival of the clan's soul. The parents themselves might not even know who or what was sacrificed in their name. Betrayal, jealousy, and infidelity carried their own punishments. In Andean tribal communities, a woman suspected of disloyalty was smeared head to toe with a paste made from mud, ashes, and herbs. She was tied to a post and surrounded by women who sang until sunrise, invoking spirits to remove her guilt. If she developed a fever, she was guilty and could no longer marry any man. Her life from then on was as a temple servant, silent, celibate, and unseen. Men who betrayed their wives were forced to cut off part of a finger or pierce their cheek with a bone shard. These acts were not symbolic. They were mandatory proof of remorse. Refusal meant exile. These dark traditions governed the fate of couples, often turning love into suffering and duty into torment. But some women resisted. They formed secret circles, hid their pain, or escaped into the forest, risking death for the chance to be free. In Part 3, we'll explore those rebellions, the sisterhoods, the spiritual unions between women and animals, the curses called down on abusive husbands, and the terrifying price paid by those who dared to flee marriage altogether. You've seen the surface. Now we enter the shadows. Though marriage in many Native American cultures was heavily ritualized, patriarchal, and steeped in sacrifice, it wasn't always accepted without resistance. Across tribes like the Iroquois, Lakota, and Mohawk, hidden networks of women formed secret circles that met under the cover of night. These weren't gatherings for gossip or prayer. They were alliances, sisterhoods bound by blood, pain, and survival. Women in these circles shared forbidden knowledge, herbal recipes to induce miscarriages, ways to fake fertility, or methods to fake injury to delay unwanted weddings. Some circles had rituals of their own. One of the most feared was the wolf cry, a spiritual curse cast upon abusive husbands. A woman would walk alone into the woods under a full moon, strip down to bare skin, cover herself in ash, and wail like a wolf until her voice broke. If she returned the next day with mysterious scratches or bruises, it meant the spirit of the wolf had hurt her. Within a year, the man who wronged her was believed to die, in battle, from illness, or by the hand of another woman. Warriors who had heard of the wolf cry often avoided confrontation with such women, fearing they carried the spirit of vengeance within them. In Apache and Cheyenne tribes, women who were cast aside after a failed wedding ceremony sometimes joined rogue clans called Shadows of Blood. These were groups of female outcasts who dressed as men, carried weapons, and lived far from tribal centers. Some lived in solitude, others hunted. Some even kidnapped men from rival tribes, keeping them as servants or, in some tales, as unwilling mates. Legends say that a woman who survived the blood ceremony and joined the shadows could gain the spiritual power of a shaman. Her words were law. Her eyes were feared. She could heal, curse, or judge. In some tribes, spiritual marriages with non-human entities were accepted and feared. A woman could choose to wed a spirit, an ancestor, or even an animal spirit, such as the bear, the eagle, or the wolf. These women wore bones of their chosen partner, performed nightly offerings, and disappeared into the wilderness during full moons. If they returned with signs of contact, blood, feathers, or scratches, the tribe believed the union had been accepted. These women could never marry men. They lived on the edge of society, both honored and avoided. But perhaps the most dramatic act of defiance was fleeing. If a woman tried to escape a wedding during or just before the ritual, she was hunted. Warriors were sent to find her. If caught, she would be brought back, and often executed. Her body was burned, her ashes scattered outside the village, her name erased. But if she survived in the wild for 7 nights, the spirits were believed to have protected her. She was reborn as a, quote, free woman, beyond the reach of men or clan. Rare as they were, such women sometimes returned years later as powerful seers or medicine women, claiming they had lived among the spirits and learned their ways. The final stage of marriage among some tribes was not a wedding, but a divorce ritual. There were no courts, no documents, only fire. A couple stood on opposite sides of a sacred fire. Between them was a bundle of shared belongings. The one who wished to separate would lift a burning stone and throw it into the bundle. From that moment, they were forbidden to speak, touch, or even look at one another. Breaking the silence brought a curse. For these tribes, love was not just personal. It was sacred, spiritual, and often terrifying. It could bless. It could curse. It could kill. If you've watched this far, thank you. Now use your voice. Share this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. These stories are more than history. They are warnings, echoes, and reminders of what power, pain, and tradition can do when no one dares to speak.